Today we're going to be looking at digital transformation and some of the practical challenges that organizations need to overcome in order to achieve their digital strategy. And I'm going to be posing a series of questions to the guys today to get their war stories and case studies of what works and what doesn't, and some of the fundamental things that you need to get right in order to make sure that your digital strategy is a success. So with that, let me introduce the panel. We have Darren Price, award-winning Group CIO and COO, formerly of RSA. Hi, Darren.
Hi, Jeremy. Really looking forward to today's session.
And Andre Symes, Managing Director at Genasys Technologies. Hello, Andre.
Thanks, Jeremy, and thank you for having me on.
Okay, Andre, so perhaps I could ask you the first question. In your experience, what are the key criteria to drive innovation?
That's a great question, Jeremy. And from a platform perspective, it is probably the single biggest challenge is the ability to adapt to change. We've seen this with a lot of the legacy platforms that we deal with in the legacy infrastructure and technology that insurance and incumbents currently have, is that the cost to change is dramatic. And that is a factor of many things. It's who participates in the projects to change. There's also the architectural back end and how difficult that is to change, what kind of coder was written in, and how you want to do that. And what that has led to happen is that it's this emergence of what we want to call the neo-passive, not the agility to change. So to drive innovation from a tech point of view, you firstly need a low-cost, agile methodology to do it. There's obviously a very big challenge in cultural change and how you can get large organizations to buy into to agility. I mean, 2 years ago, to launch a new product in 6 months was really an achievement. Today, you can do it in 2 weeks, and that kind of is becoming the benchmark. So to allow this, you need a tech platform that can do these changes. But you also need that tech platform to be able to absorb or at least talk to the legacy platforms, and then you can have your data transition. You know, no organization is going to shift a large infrastructure into newer PaaS cloud-based zero-code tooling, if you want to call it that, just to drive innovation. So you need the right tooling. You need an innovation platform that can talk to your legacy platform. The first thing that this does is that it reduces the cost to innovate. So again, to go back to business with a massive business case, a large cost, just to do an exploration of potentially a new brand or an off-aggregation product, often just gets blocked right there and then when it gets to finance. If you can test a product in the market, be it something that is a new multi-tenant kind of product, or you want to do a usage-based product or an on-demand type of insurance product, something that's insurtech, you need the infrastructure to be able to do that. And again, there's now many players in the market that can facilitate that, but then you obviously need to be able to get the data back into the legacy platforms.
I think from my experience, Jeremy, it's really interesting is that, there's lots of buzzwords that was, in the insurance sector around digitization and innovation. And I think that the key aspects for me is around, there's a full understanding about businesses need to digitize and need to innovate, but what does that actually mean for a sector that's traditionally done business the way it has for many, many decades? And how do you adopt that change and way of working into a very traditional business model? I think it's easier to do it in a personal lines GI business. I think it's certainly more difficult, to drive that change in the more complex top end risk management solutions. So I think, from as we kind of said, from my experience, I think there's a real desire of businesses and organizations to drive innovation and digitization. I think the key element is, does the business understand what that means, from both an internal perspective, but also the impact on customers and of course the value that drives to customers is really important. And I think the underlying piece around this is, have organizations got the culture and the capability to be able to drive the changes that are required, because they're just not technology changes. They're, in some instances, to drive true innovation, there can be absolutely completely different, different products and different ways of delivering those products to the customer. So I think underlying that, organizations do have a real desire to drive digitization and innovation, but do they have the true capability and ability to influence the way that business has been done over many years, and change that from a customer point of view, which ultimately needs to improve the quality of the product and the service that we provide to customers.
So that's really interesting, Darren. So of all the elements that you've just mentioned there, is there one that is fundamental to ensure this type of digital transformation works?
For me, Jeremy, I think there's two key fundamental issues that need to be addressed, and both of the same importance. I think there's the cultural aspect of being able to become a cultural digital business and understanding the changes that means. And then I think that feeds into the capability that you need to attract and acquire to be able to execute that. And again, from my experience, if you've got to get the balance really right, because going to a true, digital, agile way of working is a very, very big step for a lot of the large corporates. And often through that change, digitization or innovation is fails, because the cultural aspect and the understanding of the cultural changes in the way that you deliver digitization and innovation are underestimated, and therefore lots of initiatives often kind of fail and don't execute to the requirements. So I think those are two really important areas that need to be addressed to be able to be successful in driving a digital and innovation culture.
Talking about the failure of some of these programs or implementations, I think that one of the reasons why there's such a slowdown in innovation is inherent risk, an inherent fear of failure or consequence of failure. We all know that the corporates don't really look upon failure favorably, and the idea of innovation is to fail fast. So, I don't think that there should be a negative consequence for failure in digital transformation, or at least in innovation digitization projects, but rather to be encouraged. So potentially there's a misalignment between what the C-levels and the corporates see as failure in these digital projects, or perhaps we need to just realign and incentivize potential failure. I know that might sound counterintuitive, but you want innovation to fail fast and move on to the next one. And people shouldn't be having to risk their jobs for failure on these small projects. They are bound to fail. We need to expect that and encourage people to take the risks in innovation rather than punish them for failure on risks.
So that's really fascinating, and leads us on to the next question, which is kind of getting into the some of those elements that you've both been talking about there, which is, how do you ensure that new digital platforms don't become an additional layer of complexity and legacy? I think this is a common challenge throughout the industry. So Darren, perhaps I can ask you that first.
Thanks, Jeremy. I actually take the view that, having been involved in many global 3-4 year transformation replatforming programs, that the key to reducing complexity and addressing legacy is that you have to execute. We see many programs, especially in the kind of corporate tier 1 sector, where they're 3-year traditional waterfall type programs that often, through many reasons that we've all experienced over the years, don't execute. And many of those programs often are delayed, have to be de-scoped, cost a lot more money. And I think the appetite of organizations to approve tens of millions of pounds of IT investment in the traditional delivery is kind of coming to an end. And I think that's why there's a real emphasis on the ability to digitize, to architect solutions in a different way, to look at the way that you reduce and you migrate away from legacy, is really, I think, what's exciting in the market, because there's got to be a mind shift corporate wise, because organizations don't want tens of millions of pounds sat on the balance sheet. and not execute, and often create additional legacy. I mean, this is a challenge that we faced at RSA, and that is a long-term challenge that has to be addressed in the right way, and was and continues to be addressed ongoing. I think when you look at failure of programs, I take a view, and again, I'm sure lots of people share the same view and have the same experience, is that often programs don't fail because of the technology. I think programs fail because often you don't select the right technology to meet the need of the business. I think that technology is then overcomplicated and developed to try and meet the need of the business that the original technology or solution wasn't designed to do. I think selecting the right SI partner to support on the implementation is critical. I think we often look at the credentials of the top 5, the big SI delivery arms of FS, and it's interesting. I've just kind of been advising and delivering an ERP solution for a private equity business, and the key, I believe, is in the SI space, is picking the partner that not only has the right capabilities and technical experience of executing, that is actually a great cultural fit for that business, because often, you don't want to spend your time arguing about contractual delivery and non-delivery and costs. You want to work with a partner that fits well with the business, that fits into the culture correctly and shares the same values of being able to execute. And I've seen many successes of that, and I've seen many failures of that over the years. So I think picking the right SI. I think also there's mistakes made where we think, picking the SI and you let the SI crack on and deliver the solution doesn't work. So you've got to have you've got to wrap the right core skills and capability around the SI, specifically governance as well, to ensure that you're delivering to the correct business outcomes, and addressing jointly all the challenges that you face. So to summarize, Jeremy, I think that we increase legacy through non-delivery. I think non-delivery often isn't a technology issue. It's the way that you structure the program, build the right resources, select the right product, and select the right partner.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a challenge for everybody. No organization goes out with the intent of creating legacy, and as Darren rightfully said, legacy is often a factor of failure. And I fear that we will potentially see a lot more of that in the new emergence of the software as a service type of vendors that are being incorporated into traditional programs. And the reason why I say that is that software as a service organizations are incentivized very differently to the traditional implementations that SIs deliver. Some of them are license driven, and the other party is day rate driven. And this disincentivization or this misalignment is going to lead to potentially more failure. So we just have to gear ourselves up for and potentially find a different way of interfacing with the SIs, which will hopefully lead to less failure. From a tech point of view, it's a very interesting question to unpack. And as I mentioned, no one designs this stuff as legacy as from the outset. Obviously that would be the most ridiculous thing in the world. But what tends to happen is that organizations tend to start building proprietary-based solutions, proprietary solutions for themselves in technology. And what we have seen is that there's been an inherent desire to keep all of this, what is perceived to be IP, in-house. And as you start building up this more and more perceived IP for yourself, you end up painting yourself into a corner. And then you might have a beautiful room, but you can't move out of it again. So the way that we've approached this is that, and what we advise the people that we deal with to do is that don't try and build something that is bespoke to yourself, rather try and configure something that is bespoke to yourself, because at least that way you can change it. And also make sure that you have some sort of underlying technology. And at the moment, the best way of doing that is APIs, is to create a methodology or a framework, an infrastructure that can allow you to adopt the unforeseen changes that are still coming down the line. And we've all gone through the hype versus adoption conversations. 4 years ago, it was DLT was going to revolutionize insurance, and it hasn't yet. And then RPA is the latest one. What's happened to AI? All of these things are coming, and there's always the hype that doesn't, and it never gets adopted to that same level. But if you can create an infrastructure via APIs at the moment that you can accommodate all of this new technology down the line, at least you have the ability to get out of the room once you've painted yourself into the corner, which you obviously want to avoid from the start. So I think, Jeremy, just to summarize that, make sure that you have a system in place that can change, it can adopt, and it can adapt to the future.
So we've already talked about the key criteria to enable digital transformation, and we've touched on some of the areas to ensure it doesn't become legacy. So let's now dive into some of the key operational challenges that you need to overcome in order to deliver this stuff. So Andre, perhaps I can start with you. What do you consider to be the main operational challenges to consider in digital transformation?
Thanks, Jeremy. There's always multiple operational challenges that we have to deal with when delivering these projects, and I suppose the ones that we face in the smaller MGA and smaller insurer market is probably going to be vastly different to the challenges that Darren faces on the enterprise level. So the unique challenges that we found in the space that we operate in is quite often the interaction between the small organizations and the carriers that back them. I mean, the reason that a lot of the MGAs that we deal with are spun out is because they are specialists in their areas. And there's often a misunderstanding between the carriers as well as organizations that we deal with about how we are actually going to tackle these markets. And what that leads to is a lot of pivoting on the journey. So especially in the greenfield space, when you are launching a new MGA or a new product, that you have to pivot a lot. You have to be agile to do that. It's no longer a challenge, for some of the platform providers in the space, because they also have the agility and they also buy into the same area. Where it becomes a bit more challenging is if there are third parties that are involved that have a different methodology. So I think one of the key issues that we've always come across is that if you have a third party that is running a waterfall approach, or even one of the iterations of Agile that we're currently finding, is that how do you tie all of these together to keep alignment? Another unique one, particularly in the greenfield owner-managed space, is, for lack of a better word, the passion that they have for it. So we all know that in larger projects that we've done, so we've done a couple of larger projects where it is on the corporate basis, it's all about the success of the project. Very few people that are participating in that program actually have a personal vested interest in that program, which is not so when you are dealing with startups. A lot of the people are owner-managed and have put their own money behind it. And that does lead to a level of pressure for the project. So it's always about making sure that you can contain that pressure in an amicable way and make sure that you actually deliver something that the market needs, and not necessarily something that you as the owner manager perceive to be right. So that is always a challenge, is to deal with owner managed organizations where there's a lot of passion about what they're doing. And that's a bit of a challenge sometimes. And then again, as I mentioned, the agility is being able to pivot along with that. On the challenges that we found when we're dealing with a large organization, so a program that we did in South Africa as an example, we did 68 commercial products and 5 simultaneous data migrations. It was a large replatforming process. Was then, how does an agile organization like the one that I work for fit into a corporate? Then again, there's immediate misalignment. You're dealing with program and project managers that aren't necessarily incentivized to make go live deadlines, but rather to make sure that everything in the program is done as on a waterfall approach and everything is perfectly delivered. Whereas we are more geared to deal with the agility and to pivot with that. So we've often found cultural differences too.
I think the key for this for me is from a technology point of view, is that you have to have a really strong architectural roadmap. You have to architect the migration away from legacy, deliver the right component-based architecture that over time, we all know it takes time to re-platform businesses. Even if you go on an agile digital approach, it takes time. So you've got to have the right architecture that allows you, to build new products from a digital point of view to launch in market, even on legacy, whilst in the background you're driving new re-platforming or new digital products into the business and into the market. So I think that component-based architecture, I think, as we said, previously, moving away from 3-year programs, test and learn, drive components of delivery in a specific market, being able to leverage that further and wider across the enterprise, learning from that experience, and then having a very component-based, small delivery, agile delivery program to prove and test that your strategy is working and that you have the capability to execute on that. Not only addresses the IT element of legacy, but actually differentiates completely in the speed and agility to deliver for the business product to market. So I think that's the big shift that's currently in train. I think, as Andre says, there's many a new technology advancement that is available in the market. The key is how you then, operationalize that new technology benefit and how you build that into your core business process and ways of working to serve customer.
So Darren raises some really, really good points there about how do you actually operationalize this test and learn. And earlier I spoke about having a innovation platform to drive new products in a cost-effective way, to fail fast, to fail in an inexpensive manner, I suppose, is what you really want to do. The question is then, what do you do if you then get the scalability of that product? If you're launching product X, Y, and Z, and the next thing you know, you've got 30, 40,000 policies being sold in that. Do you then take that and migrate it back into the legacy problem that you already have, putting it into the room where you've painted yourself into a corner, or do you then let it run on this? And the question then poses that you have to pose yourself is that, can this new tooling actually facilitate scalable business? So I think that's probably a very good point for me to at least close off on, is that it's great having innovation and it's okay having legacy. Everybody's going to have to do this, but surely the answer lies somewhere in the middle. That you need to be able to fail fast, you need to be able to test new products, and if it works, you need to be able to run that business in a way that is future-proofed and not just move it onto your legacy platform again.
That's been an absolutely fascinating insight into how Darren and Andre approach digital transformation. I just want to thank them both for their thoughts and insights. So thanks very much, Darren.
Thanks, Jeremy. Really enjoyed it. Hope to see you soon.
And thanks very much, Andre.
Thanks again for having me on. It was a wonderful conversation, and it was always great to hear the point of view from Darren. Very educational. Thanks a lot.
And we look forward to seeing you on the next one.